Hi, glad you could join me. In just under a few minutes, I want us to look at do a small preview of Ivory Coast versus Zambia. And so, on paper, it promises to be a very difficult match, and I think in reality, it is also going to be a very difficult match. But then, in football, as always, depending on how you plan and how you execute on any particular day, you always stand a chance. So, going into this match, I think the best scenario could be getting the 3 points. But then, if that doesn't happen, then at least a minimum of 1 point. Then we try and build on that against Comoros, which will also not be a very easy game. And so, quickly, what could Zambia do tactically to be able to get the desired result in that match? And so I think even before we look at the tactics, I think there are certain basics that we must try and appreciate. First and foremost, I think the coach must put his best foot forward in this match from the onset. But then one would argue to say it would be not maybe the best decision. But then my point is, why do you want to hold back against a team that is not going to hold back? What is just important is just to exercise wisdom in the match. Know which moments to pick, but the coach must put his best foot forward from the onset. And I think the coach must also play the best cards. Play his best players on the day, but then be wise enough to have the substitutes that could come off the bench and impact the match positively. You can also not forget the fact that I think the coach will have to play to his strengths, play to the strengths of the players, and I think having been around for a while now, he knows the strength of each and every player. Now, let's get into it tactically. This is the kind of stuff that excites me. Tactically, what do Zambia have to do in attack? The first thing that they have to do in attack is just maximize on the chances that they're going to create. But then the key question is, how are they going to create these chances? Number one, I think it's important to appreciate the fact that Ivory Coast are most likely going to set up in a 4-3-3 formation. Now, what a 4-3 formation does is that it creates a lot of half spaces which you could potentially use, and there are also a chance of playing in between the lines. So Zambia have to, make use of the half spaces and play in between the lines. In between the lines basically means, you have these banks of 4-3-3. There are those spaces in between. Those are the half, the what you would call the in between the lines. And then the half spaces is, for example, you have a centre back, a full back, a midfielder. There is that space in between there. That is what you call a half space. So in a match like this, it's important that we try and make use of the half spaces as well as try and play in between the lines. What else do we have to do? I think we have to use a lot of our ball carriers and space interpreters. Space interpreters is similar to what I spoke about earlier on. It's about players that are able to identify which areas of space to go into, play in those in those spaces, and we'll have to make use of our ball carriers. Ball carriers are basically players that are able to carry the ball maybe over a stretch of 10 meters or more, maybe 8 or more meters, because they help you push up a little bit. In a match like this, we have to avoid playing very deep. We have to move forward as much as possible. And so ball carriers in a situation like this in attack become very critical. Space interpreters, a player like Kangwa, for example, a player like Enoch becomes very critical in a match like this. We also have to do a lot of isolation play, isolate them in 1v1 situations. You will realize that because they are a very attack-minded team, the players that play in the wide areas like your Max Gradel and say your Nicolas Pep are not the best as far as tracking back is concerned, and that is why we can take advantage of isolation in 1v1. We know what Fashion Sakala can do in a one-on-one situation. He's able to take on. We know what Tubambo Msonda can do. We know what Lamek Banda can do. So try and isolate their defenders in one-on-one situations, and then we can try and get the penetration going forward. Ideally, the other thing that we could do is that we must try and stretch the play in the wide area. So the main striker, whoever it is going to be, it could be a Patson Daka, it could be a Fashion Sakala on a day, or whoever is going to be opted for, must try and stretch the play by playing, going into the wide areas to stretch the defense, going into the wide areas to pull the defenders, and hoping that those that are going to be coming from behind can try and penetrate through the spaces that are going to be created after he stretches the play. The other thing that we'll be looking to do, I think, is that let us try as much as possible, when the opportunities are presented, long-range shooting, that can be tried. For a team like Ivory Coast, they are very used to dominating the possession, and what that does usually to the goalkeepers is that they get a bit, they lose their guard in a way. They rest on their laurels, and that is something that we can take advantage of. A lot of long-range shooting, if it can work, then it serves as well. We have players that are able to do that in the team, and Emmanuel Banda can do that. Kangwa is able to do that. Fashion Sakala is able to do that. So that is something that we could potentially do, because Sylvain Gebuho is, sometimes he loses bits of concentration, especially when his side is dominating the possession. And so I think in attack, those are some of the things that we can possibly do to try and get the result. Defensively, where a lot of people are worried. Now, defense to start with is not just about the back four or your back three or your back five and the goalkeeper. It's purely about the whole team. So what could the whole team do defensively to try and put us in a position where we can defend accordingly and win this football match? I think there will be need to have a lot of closeness in the banks, the space between the back four and the midfielders, the defensive midfielders, the attacking midfielders, and the strikers. I think we must manage that space very well, because that is where they could potentially hit us. Ideally, the spaces should not be beyond maybe 8 meters per se, or maybe between 6 to 8 meters. Anything beyond that could be, a bit of a worry. Anything more than 12 meters could be a bit of a worry, because to allow them a lot of space and they could potentially hit us from there. The other thing that we have to do, potentially something that a lot of you may not agree with, but I think we have to apply a medium press. A high press may not really be the best, because I think we haven't practiced a lot. But if we are able to get it right, then well and good. But if not, let's try and do a medium press. I do not think a low block would save us very well, because I don't think we have the defenders that could sustainably play 90 minutes just sitting on top of their box, and it could easily be broken. But if we can do a medium press, I think it will do us a lot of good. We also have to try and mirror what they are going to do in the midfield. Remember earlier on I said they might play a 4-3-3, so they are going to have a 3 in the midfield. Now the best way of countering those is that you have to mirror what they are doing in a way. So not that you do exactly what they're doing, but you just try and mirror it. So meaning we'll need at least 3 in the middle, 3 to 5, so that we're able to have one-on-one situations, and maybe probably even have an extra or 2 extra men in midfield, and that could actually help us a lot defensively. Even in attack, it could actually help us as well. We also have to try and block the long ball. Now they are able to create from deep. There's a midfielder called Jean-Michel Seri. You may remember him from the OGC Nice days, or the time that played at Fulham in the Premier League. This is a player that sometimes will play as a deep six and is able to thread those balls forward. Then once that happens, I think they could potentially hit us. So we must try as much as possible to block that from happening. If we are not able to stop the deep lying playmaker from playing, then the option then becomes contesting for the second ball. And I think the second ball is going to be very important in that match. They have a Sebastian Heller on top, and they will put in a lot of long balls so that someone goes and feeds off him. So it will be important to contest the second ball. If we are not able to contest the second ball, then we are going to be in for maybe probably a rough ride, really. Let me know what you think about this content. I would like to know your views as well over this, what we can do in attack, what we can do in defense, and other things that you would want us to discuss around the match. Moving forward, the other thing that we could do defensively is that we must try and avoid the 1v1 situations, especially in the wide areas. Look, there's a Max Gradel on the other side, there's a Wilfred Zaha on the other side potentially, there's a Nicolas Pepe potentially on the other side. And so if we're going to allow those to go 1v1 against our fullbacks, I think it could potentially be a very long night. So we must try and avoid that. The other way of avoiding that, apart from avoiding the group from coming deep from the middle, is that you could actually ask your midfielders to be covering their fullbacks so that they're not really exposed, and I think that could save us very well. So we must try and avoid the 1v1. And also in line with similar to that, I think we must try as much as possible to have them play right in front of us. If they are going to put us in a situation where our defenders begin to face our own goal, then it's going to be a lot of trouble. So we must always try and make them play right in front of us, so that we're able to screen what is coming from all the areas. Players are able to look in all areas and be able to defend accordingly. Crucially as well, we must try as much as possible to be very alert on the set pieces, because with time that is something that has hit us, and it hasn't served us well really as far as defending set pieces are concerned. So I think that is something that we have to be wary about. Moving on. Another thing tactically is that you have to be mindful of is the transition. Now transitions, there are two. There's a positive transition and the negative transition. On the negative transition, the moment we lose the ball, what are we supposed to do? I think it will be important that we maintain the closeness of banks, like I said earlier on, so that we're able to apply the right pressure at the right moment. The moment we lose the ball, the first player that is closest to the ball must press, and that is what is called a counter press. So apart from closing the banks, we need to do a counter press and get it right. after the counter press, or outside the counter press, we need to do the pressing right. I think I spoke about this a bit earlier on. And then we also have to do a lot of disruptive play. Disruptive play is, you lose the ball, you create the professional power if you like, but let this be created in areas where the potential to hit us is very minimal. In their own half, we can do the disruptive play. Around the center zone, we can do the disruptive play and try as much as possible to avoid them doing a quick start, because they could hit us potentially from there. On the positive transition, when we win the ball, what are we supposed to do? I think let us try as much as possible to put the ball into the wide areas where they could potentially be a lot of strength for us, in the form of a Fashion Sakala, Lamek Banda, Rwambom Sonda. Those are the players that could hit them, So the moment you get the ball as much as possible, as early as possible, put it in the wide areas, and try and see if the joy can come from there. And then we also have to make use of our ball carriers, like I said earlier on. The moment you win the ball, find your Enoch Mwepo, find your clean scammer, find the player that is next on his bike, carry the ball forward, go and do the business from up there. And I think tactically, those are the things that we could do to actually help us win the match. Now, tactics aside and all those other nice things aside, what are the other key components that will be required to actually get something out of this match? Number one, there has to be the right character in the players, the right character, the right mentality of saying they're able to do this. There is need to have the will to do. There is need for both individual and collective the belief that they are able to do this task. There has to be a lot of versatility. Remember, you're going to a particular match hoping to set up in a particular way, or expecting them to come in a particular way, but when you are not able to do that, what do? You adjust accordingly and take the pressure as it may come. And then I think finally, it will also be important that the players have the right mental strength and the right mental fitness to be able to get the result. Like I said earlier on, it's not going to be an easy match on paper, and even in reality, it's not going to be an easy match. But when the planning is done correctly and the application is done correctly, you always stand a chance of winning a football match. Thank you for joining me. I hope we can get back and review the match. Until then, bye bye and take care.